as the father had tried to train all of his children to pray, his youngest son was sitting there next to him, and he called on him to pray. And he said in that childlike way, "Dear God, we had a really good worship today. I wish you could have been there." You know, that's a sad commentary if it's the case that we have worship and God's not with us. That's saying something about us. It's not saying anything about God. We would hope that every time we worship, it reaches to heaven itself. And yes, God is there with us. We're going to study about worship today. We're going to look at something in the Bible, then we're going to look at an English definition. We're going to look at a statement by an old preacher that's passed on. We're going to look at the Greek definition of worship. And we're going to look at the word kiss. We're going to look at a position or posture in worship. And I think from all of this, we're going to come to a better understanding of what worship is. And then, if time permits, we'll look at some general things about worship itself. Worship. That's the subject for today and the next 6 weeks after today. In John chapter 4, verses 19 through 24, this is the story of Jesus and the woman at the well. You read beginning of verse 19, "And the woman said to him, 'Sir, I perceive you are a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, but you say that in Jerusalem is the place where people ought to worship.' Jesus said to her, 'Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, for salvation is from the Jews. But the hour is coming and is now here when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For the Father is seeking such people to worship Him. God is spirit, and those who worship Him must worship in spirit and in truth." In these 5 verses, you find that word worship over and over and over again. And you know something? Most of you are here every Sunday. And worship is something that you do over and over and over again. And so we need to be sure to be worshiping as God directs and teaches. So how do you know what something is? Let me tell you, it's great if somebody knows Greek. But it's not necessary to know Greek to understand the Bible. We have good translations, and sometimes we come upon words. Get out an English dictionary. That's really the first place to look. As those translators were putting Greek into English, they were using the contemporary meaning of those words. Now, words have changed over time, so depending on your translation, well, sometimes those English words have grown archaic. But if it's a more modern translation, usually the contemporary usage of the word we're used to today. It's the meaning of that word you read in the Bible. So we're going to start with an English dictionary on the word worship. Look at this. To honor or reverence a divine being or supernatural power. To regard with great or extravagant respect, honor, or devotion a celebrity worshipped by her fans. You know, as concerns this, I think you understand it pretty well. But I want us to delve more deeply into this word worship so that when we finish, you say, I get it. And some of the things we're going to do, I'll admit, I hope that you kind of put your mind in gear, that you'll think, reason, so that you can come to this better understanding of this word worship. Guy in Woods, a preacher that's passed on, did so many good for so many years. He made this statement about worship. The word most commonly used in the New Testament to denote this act means to kiss the hand toward, an act in Oriental countries signifying obeisance. In the New Testament, it denotes homage, reverence, awe, etc. And it includes such acts as may be utilized in expressing or exhibiting these emotions and attitudes. This statement's really a good introduction to what we're going to do now as we look more specifically at this word worship. Worship, proskuneo, is not the only word translated worship in the New Testament. It is, however, the word that is most often translated worship in the New Testament. And this word proskuneo, it comes from two words, pros, meaning towards or to, and kuneo, to kiss. And that's why Guy and Wood said, and I have heard since I was a little boy, proskuneo means to kiss the hand towards. And I will admit to you that for years and years and years I thought, to kiss the hand towards, what is that? And I didn't really get a better understanding of the word worship just by this phrase, to kiss the hand towards. But yet you see, proskuneo, towards. Kuneo, to kiss the hand towards. Now I've heard several people, just in this past few months to a year, and read as well, someone speak of proskuneo. It's like blowing a kiss to heaven. And I hope that when you can get to a conclusion of what we're looking at, you almost think in these terms. Proskuneo is defined in Thayer's Greek lexicon to kiss the hand towards one in token of reverence. Then among the Orientals, especially the Persians, to fall on the knees and touch the ground with the forehead as an expression of profound reverence. And kind of a by the way, you see Guy and Woods had a good introduction to this because that's essentially what he referenced. Thayer's also says in the New Testament, by kneeling or prostration to do homage to one or make obeisance, whether in order to express respect or to make supplication. And we're going to find later on that sometimes this word proskuneo in newer translations in certain places translated kneeling down or kneeling before, and this is the reason. Used of homage shown to men and beings of superior rank, such as to the Jewish high priest or to God, to Christ, to heavenly beings. It's proskuneo, to kiss the hand towards. Proskuneo, to kneel before. I told you for a long time this to kiss the hand towards just didn't do anything for me. And it's really because I wasn't really kind of thinking through it. And thinking about maybe the kiss itself. And admittedly, sometimes people think the word kiss, and they're thinking about their wife or their husband, and they're thinking about romance. And I think, wait, to kiss the hand towards, that still doesn't help me. But when you look and see the many ways the kiss is used, well, then it helped for me to understand worship. This is a picture of Dennis Thatcher greeting United States First Lady Nancy Reagan by kissing her hand in 1988. This is just to illustrate. Now, why is he kissing her and kissing her hand? Well, we might say greeting. at its very kind of base level, a greeting. We might also even say an element of respect and maybe even of honor. Here's another picture. It's a Bulgarian woman kissing the hand of Emperor Ferdinand in 1916. Keeping in mind, he's the emperor. She's one of his subjects. And now it goes beyond just a greeting, doesn't it? But this kiss, it was paying homage to him. It was venerating him. It was the acknowledgement of, he's my king and ruler. Religiously, some religious people use a kiss. In fact, I'd say this, we wouldn't use it in this manner, but it again illustrates. Here's the Vice President of Brazil, Jose Alencar, and kisses the ring on the right hand of the Cardinal Jose Ferrer Falcao. And what's he doing there? Once again, it goes beyond just the greeting, maybe that, but it begins to be an acknowledgement of the position of the man, to venerate him, to honor him, showing respect to him. About 5 to 6 years ago, Tish went with me to Ukraine. And one day, after kind of everything had settled down for that day, it was a Sunday, it was in the afternoon, we took a walk. And we walked by what was a newly constructed Orthodox, and I'm not sure exactly what to call it, church building, temple, and I don't even remember if it was Russian Orthodox or Ukrainian Orthodox. There in Gorlovka, you had both. And if someone said, what's the main difference? One of the main differences is, in Russian Orthodox, they look to their head of the church, he's in Russia. And Ukrainian Orthodox, the head of their church, he's in Ukraine. But there's a lot of similarities, more similarities than the difference in the two groups. I said, Tish, let's go in there. No. Come on, Tish, let's go in. Well, she didn't want to be left outside by herself, so she went in with me. And it was obvious. People were kind of going in and coming out. It wasn't like, I don't think then, that we were going to be kind of interrupting an assembly like we have here. And sure enough, we walked in there, and there was no place to assemble. No place to assemble. And there were no pews and there were no chairs. It was kind of built circular, and you walked in and the inside was circular. And what you had on the outside walls and the kind of the inside wall, you had the bust of some saints and then pictures of saints. And of course you realize that oftentimes this word icon is used with regards to the bust and the pictures of those saints. And what you would see people do is they would be mouthing like as if a prayer to that saint. And then they would either say, if it was a bust, they might bow down and kiss it, or kiss at the bottom of that picture, or maybe kiss their hand and then touch it. Well, in kissing, what were they doing? There's a lot of things, once again, you could say. Showing their respect, venerating, honoring. And some may say worship, some may not say worship, but here we see this word kiss and the ways that it's used. And then there's that little baby. Now, I want to tell you something. One of my favorite things to do is to grab up Addie, my granddaughter, go kiss her all over her cheek, on her neck. And you understand that if you're a grandparent. You understand it if you're a mom, if you're a dad. Probably you understand that if you're your aunt, your uncle. And there again, what about that kiss? And you think, you love them. And it's affection. Somebody almost says, I love that child so much I could just eat him up or eat her up. And so all those little kisses on the cheek, on the neck. Once again, think about this kiss. So how do we use this word kiss? You see, we've seen that it's used with regards to greeting. Deference. In other words, I'm beneath you, below you. Respect. Homage. Worship. Adoration. Reverence. Veneration. Affection. Respectfulness. Honor. Submission. Love. And so it has been, even in ancient times and even till today. This is the way the kiss can be used. And so now this to kiss the hand towards, proskuneo, or in English, worship. You say you think of every one of those words between the kissing and the worship. And you begin to get it. What we're doing, it's as simple as our greeting to God, but it's showing our deference for Him, our respect for Him, homage to Him, worship to Him, adoration for Him, reverence to Him, venerating His name, affection for Him and love for Him, respectfulness and submission. And in this way we're honoring Him. This is the kiss, and this is kissing the hand towards God. And that's why some people then would say, think of your worship as blowing a kiss toward God. Now I know someone might hear that, blowing a kiss toward God. They might even think, that almost sounds disrespectful. Not when you see the meaning of the word and the depth of the meaning. Proskuneo, to kiss the hand towards. But I want you to see something else now. The posture in worship. That even can help us, I think, get an idea about, what is this worship thing? What does it mean? Now, there's several times you're going to find the posture connected with the word worship. For instance, in Matthew 4, verses 8 and 9. Now here, of course, this is the devil saying to Jesus, tempting Him to worship the devil. But notice how he uses these words. He says, in the yellow there, if you fall down and worship me. In Acts 10:25, Peter entered, Cornelius met him and fell down at his feet and worshiped him. There you've got the posture, there you've got that worship word. Now somebody says once again, well, wait a second, this is not to be done. In fact, Peter corrected Cornelius in this context, didn't he? But you see something about this, the posture and worship. In Revelation 4:10, the 24 elders, and by the way, Revelation chapter 4, one of the most beautiful chapters showing how worthy our God is of worship. And what a beautiful picture that John describes as he's writing something he saw. The 24 elders fall down before Him who is seated on the throne and worship Him. Again, the posture and worship. Revelation 19:10, then I fell down at His feet to worship Him. Once again, there was a correction that took place here. Revelation 22:8, I fell down to worship at the feet of the angel. But what I'm wanting you to see, the posture, falling down, and the worshiping. Now I want you to see something else. We had mentioned this when we looked at that word proskuneo and what it means. And I want you to see here, there's some examples of where it's translated, this word proskuneo, translated differently in the King James Version and in the English Standard Version. If somebody said, well, which is correct, I'm just going to say yes. It's fair to say both are correct. But here in Matthew chapter 8, verse 2, in the King James Version, you read the word worship. In the English Standard, you read the word knelt before. In Matthew 9, verse 18, in King James, worship, and then in English Standard, knelt before. Matthew 15:25, you read the word worship in the King James, knelt before in English Standard Version. Matthew 20, verse 20, you read the word worship, the King James Version, kneeling before in the English Standard Version. Mark chapter 5, verse 6, you read the word worship, the King James Version, and fell down before in the English Standard Version. Mark 15, verse 19, you read, once again, worship in the King James Version, and in homage in the English Standard Version. And then in Revelation chapter 3, verse 9, you read worship, King James Version, bow down in the English Standard Version. And now I want to remind you, remember back when we were at proskuneo? That second meaning, the first E was to kiss the hand towards. But the second was among the Orientals, especially the Persians, to fall down upon the knees, touch the ground with the forehead as an expression of profound reverence. And then he goes on in the New Testament by kneeling or prostration to do homage to one or make obeisance, whether in order to express respect or to make supplication. And so that's why it was appropriate and right and linguistically correct to say bow down or kneel before for the word worship, and certainly fit within those contexts. Now I know somebody might say, well, why now? You're talking about the posture. You're talking about we got to literally bow down. I want you to see that this posture, it was illustrating the honor giving to the one bowed before. Now we now are not in the physical presence of God, but friends, mentally, emotionally, we bow down before our King and God in worship. Again, to kneel before, it helps describe worship. And think of it this way. Every time you worship, it's your opportunity to kneel before your Maker. No, He's not in our physical presence. He's not standing here before you. But friends, once again, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, we are bowing down before Him in worship. And so this proskuneo, to kiss the hand towards, you think about the word kiss, the many ways it's used. And yes, our worship is that blowing a kiss to God. Proskuneo, to kneel before. And so in worship, our hearts are kneeling before our God. Now I want you to see something else. It's just kind of real simple. In the American Standard Version, at Matthew chapter 2, verse 2, that's the way it looks. I know, kind of hard for you to read. In Matthew chapter 2, verse 2, that's the point where the wise men come to Jerusalem, and here it says, well, you know, you tell me. They're asking, where is He that we might, and there you find that worship Him And then you have a footnote. You can't read that either. Here's the footnote. The Greek word denotes an act of reverence, whether paid to a creature, and you can see these passages in the book of Matthew, or to the Creator, once again, chapter 4, verse 10 in Matthew. And so here's the American Standard translation, if you would, of that Greek word, an act of reverence paid to, and for our intents and purposes, the Creator. An act, yes, it's something we do, but it's of reverence. It involves your heart. It involves your mind. When you think of that word worship, think of the English definition, proskuneo, the kissing part of that definition, the bowing down part of that definition. And to put it in other words, an act of reverence paid to our deity. And I'll admit, as I look at the time, there's actually a lot of the lesson left, and we won't finish. We won't look at all of it. But just kind of very quickly, if our worship is God approved, it's got to be directed towards the right object. You find in Exodus 34:14, you shall worship no other God. And in Matthew chapter 4, verse 10, you find Jesus saying, you shall worship the Lord your God, and Him only shall you serve. So understand this, God, He's it, the only one we are to worship. Not idols. In fact, we find in Exodus 20 in the 10 Commandments, we find how that this is forbidden, clearly forbidden. Exodus 20 verses 3 through 5. So not idols. And we find it's not men. In fact, when the men from Cornelius bowed down before Peter, he says, stand up. I too am a man. So no, don't worship men. Neither are you to worship angels. John was just so caught up with this revelation he had received. He bowed down before this angel to worship him. And then verse 9, the angel said, you must not do that. I am a fellow servant with you and your brothers prophets, and with those who keep the words of this book. Worship God. So God is that object of worship. We find that we are to ascribe to the Lord the glory and worship the Lord. Psalm 29 verse 2. And in Psalm 95 verse 1 and 2, oh come, let us sing to the Lord. Verse 2, let us come into His presence with thanksgiving. Let us make a joyful noise to Him with songs of praise. You see, it's God that's that proper object of worship. He's the one that deserves our worship. As I mentioned, you want to find one of the most beautiful scenes of worship in the Bible, you go to Revelation chapter 4. And what you're seeing there, what you're reading there, is what John saw. And so, kind of, as you read it, form a mental image, a mental picture, to get what John was seeing. And there you find the 24 elders fall down before Him who is seated on the throne and worship Him who lives forever and ever. They cast their crowns before the throne, saying, worthy are you, our Lord and God, to receive glory and honor and power. For you created all things, and by your will they existed and were created. He deserves our worship. We're just going to right now kind of go on through this, and we'll look at it at another time, some of it next week. As we close, I hope that you have a better understanding and appreciation for worship. In the past years, I think I've probably preached as many or more lessons on worship as any other subject, because it's something that it affects us so much, something we do so regularly. So we need to study it. But it's been seldom that I've taken, an entire series like we're doing now. and 2 lessons on worship itself. Then we'll be looking at each individual act of worship over then the next 5 weeks, so a total of 7. And I hope that each week you better understand and appreciate what we are doing in worship. You know, it is God that we worship. It's God that created us. God that put within us a soul. It is God, too, that holds us accountable. And as such, we've all fallen short. But it's God, too, that's gracious, willing to save. So to the extent that He sent His Son, and Jesus, venerated maybe by some, but ultimately killed, crucified as a common criminal, His blood shed. And this was for our salvation. So would you respond? Yes, God desires you to be saved. But He tells us how. It's His way that we must believe. John 3:16. Turn from our sin. That's repentance. Luke 13:3. To confess our faith and then be baptized for the forgiveness of sins. Acts 2:38. We could assist you in that this morning. If there's need for prayer, we ask that you would come as we stand.